Welcome to the Anatomy of a Strategy podcast. This is Carlos Pacheco.
And my name is Tara Hunt. And this week we have the brilliant and amazing Geraldine DeRuiter, who we had the pleasure to sit down with here in beautiful Victoria, British Columbia. It was sort of a last minute booking because we saw her speak and thought, wow, this would be an amazing podcast interview. Geraldine, for those of you who don't know her, is an acclaimed author, world-renowned public speaker, and the voice behind the award-winning Everywhere's blog. She finds it very difficult to be self-promotional, as she says in her bio, and so she hopes that you understand how hard that last sentence was for her to write. She is a brilliant writer, she is a brilliant mind, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. Welcome to Anatomy of a Strategy, Geraldine. We have sitting here today with us Geraldine DeRuiter. I hope I said that right.
You said it great.
Do you want to tell people that may not already follow you who you are, where they can follow you, and why they should be following you?
Sure. My name is Geraldine DeRuiter, as you wonderfully said my last name. My blog is The Everywhereist, so it's www.everywhereist.com, and that's also my Twitter handle. It's Everywhereist. At Everywhereist. And I can be found on Twitter pretty easily, and my contact information is on my blog. I started as a travel writer.
And that's where the Everywhereist came from.
Yeah, exactly. And it sort of started in the travel space, but it kind of moved to social and political commentary, feminist commentary, observational humor, and just kind of light journalism sort of across the board since then. So that's the space that I have been writing in. And the more I've written about feminism and the more I've written about politics, I've found that the attention that I started getting was very different. So
yeah, because travel is a very nice and a little bit banal topic. It doesn't push any hot buttons. There's
truth to that to a degree, but I also found that even when I was just writing about travel, and this is true of a lot of female travel writers I know, you still get the death threats. So,
oh wow, okay,
yeah. I think I had written about, I can't even remember. It was a pretty benign trip, and I had written about it on my blog, and it garnered one of the first pieces of hate mail that I had ever received. And the person told me I deserved to be kidnapped, raped, and murdered, and my body dumped somewhere where no one would find it, so my family would never have closure.
Wow, that is like...
And I was like, this is my travel blog.
You were writing great posts around travel and insights, etc. Did nothing wrong. You were not out there. You were no Alex. What's his face? The bad guy that's on the InfoWars guy. Alex
Jones.
Yeah,
is that his name?
Yep.
You weren't like spewing hate or spreading fake news, and you got attacked.
Right.
What? Like why?
I think, for one thing, it's usually not people who are spreading hate rhetoric that are getting attacked or, targeted with this sort of stuff. Like
driven offline.
Yeah,
We'd only hope.
I know. Like Alex Jones is not getting driven offline, and also I think that there's not really a parallel to be drawn there, because that's a man who literally has created torment and misery and has incited and endangered the lives of the parents of murdered children. He has made their lives more miserable, and that's a horrifying thing, and he will continue to do that. Whereas the people who are usually the targets of this stuff are very often women who are visible, and more often than not, actually disproportionately so, are women of color who are getting the most abuse. And I think what we're seeing is just it is just, systemic sexism and systemic racism, and it just all is manifesting in these pretty terrible ways. And when women are more vocal and have agency and an audience online, that bothers certain groups.
Yeah, and you had some really amazing insights where you talked about what you thought were some of the underlying things that were happening, and they were coming out of a lot of the excuses that people were making for this behavior, or ways that they would dismiss this behavior. I think one of them was, it's no big deal. It's just online. It's, just a joke kind of.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of ways in which this behavior is rationalized. And one is that it's just an online threat, and so you shouldn't take it seriously, which is really fascinating, because I think we've seen time and again a lot of, at least in the United States, we have a repeated, persistent problem with mass shootings, and virtually every time this happens, there is concrete evidence of, or almost a trail of comments and hatred that you can follow based on someone's online activity, and that happens again and again. There have been a few female writers who have written extensively about this. One of them is Amanda Hess, and one of the things that she said is, I'm constantly told that it's just an online threat, but really all I need is one of these hundreds of people who's telling me that they're going to come kill me to make good on it.
Well, you said you received something at your home.
Yeah, I received
during
a letter.
This time.
Yeah,
they knew your address. I mean, and they wanted to show you.
Yeah, they wanted to make a point of doing that.
So if it was just online, why would they do that?
Why not just send me an email? Yeah, and there's been a few instances like that. Rand had posted when he started. So my husband just recorded an episode with you.
We talked to Rand earlier, yeah.
But, Rand started a new company, and he posted photos, or he posted, and he blogged about his new office, which is at the back of our house, and it's in a little kind of like cute little separate studio, and someone had taken photos of this and put it on Twitter, and some guy commented and said, I actually want to torch this shed.
Wow.
And it's alarming. And I've seen there have been a lot of, Rand's incited a lot of stuff like that. And part of it has been, he's been very vocal about having women speak at MozCon, which is the conference that's associated with the company that Rand founded. And he pioneered MozCon having a 50-50 pledge of having half women speakers. And that's kind of when it started for him. So we see abuse of men when they are allies of women as well. But it has been in ways that, occasionally it's been people who I've met in the real world who, once or twice it's been someone who I don't know well, but I've been in the same room as them. And now they're saying that they're going to, torch my husband's shed or do all of these things. And I
don't take it personally.
Don't take it personally.
Geraldine, because it's just the internet.
Joke. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And that's very, I think it would take a robot to not take that personally.
Well, and I also think it's just more of the way in which we kind of just gaslight and make women feel like they're, or anyone who's dealing with this, feel like they're losing their minds. And the thing that I always say when people are like, oh, I'm not serious, I'm just kidding around, I'm like, cool, then do it unanonymously and do it to your boss.
Yeah.
Do it to someone who holds political office in your town. Tell them that you're going to torch their home office without being anonymous. I want to see, because if you're truly kidding, if you truly don't mean it, if there's nothing harmful about what you're doing, then there should be no negative consequences to you doing that. But once there's someone with more power at the end of the threat that they're making, then they back down.
Yeah, speaking of power and gaslighting, like I just feel like all I want in this world is enough power to fight to not be gaslit, right? To not have to be in that powerless position where is it my fault? Did I do something wrong?
Yeah, I don't know how that happens. I know. It does feel very hopeless sometimes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's not, by the way. It's not.
No, and you gave a lot of hopeful ideas.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about
those? I mean, I think there are a few. One of the things I talked about is kind of to your point, supporting companies with diverse founders. And it's actually proven that if a company, because a lot of the problem that we see on social media and a lot of this kind of systemic misogyny and systemic racism that we see, I think it's very, I don't think it's a lot of people who are setting out to say, I am going to be a racist, misogynistic shit. But I think it's a lot of people. Can I cuss on your show? I just did. Okay. Whoops. But I think it's a lot of people who are blind to their own privilege and just unaware of it. And
which is a hard thing to call people out for. It's not hard to call them out, but people don't tend to take that feedback.
No, and it kind of goes
reflectively.
No, and it kind of goes back to that just world belief. You don't want to think that you are part of that problem. Yeah. That's a very hard reality to accept, especially if you've worked to try and be a good person. It's really hard to be like, wait, what? Shit, right? Like I've been contributing to all of this systemic garbage, and I had no idea. That's a hard realization. And I think,
as a white woman, I'm going to acknowledge right now that I do hugely, enormously benefit from so much privilege.
Oh yeah.
I was raised I was sent to university, and that was paid for. Yeah. And I have had so many doors open for me. So, and I'm sure that there are things that I've done along the way that have been blind to how I was. Well, I know that there have been ways that I've been blind to how I was leveraging that privilege.
No, same. I mean, I'm in the exact same boat, and I often I was talking to a friend of mine about it, and I was like, the best example that came out was, fish don't see water.
Yeah.
It's hard to see these things. But one of the things that's a struggle is kind of trying to convince companies why do you need diverse hires? Why do you need powerful women in your company? Why do you need women of color in your company? That's a hard thing to explain to people when their default response is always the rage-inducing, why don't we just hire the best person? And you're like, those two things are not mutually exclusive. Yeah. But when you've got diverse founders, I think you have women who are more aware, who have dealt with these problems, and it's part of the makeup of the company to confront these issues, to be aware of these issues, and to be more attuned to combating them and to lifting women up. And one of the things I also said is one of the groups that gets pushed off of social media platforms in the largest number are people of color, because they're the group most likely to experience harassment. And so one of the pieces of advice that I have is if you are kind of a gatekeeper of information, whether you are a publisher or an editor or a producer or a director, these are the stories that you need to be seeking out and promoting, because they're the ones that are getting lost.
Yeah, absolutely. There's lots of data now, too, that supports that having the diverse founders, having more women in senior positions actually leads a company to perform better, whether it's a startup or an established. company. There's plenty of data out there.
I mean, it's funny because it's the thing is you should do it because it's the right thing to do, but you should also do it because it is financially going to benefit
Absolutely.
you.
Half your consumers are usually women.
Yeah.
So not having women on making those decisions about product, about distribution, about marketing is really stupid.
When we were having a discussion about this earlier, I think that there are certain companies that, are struggling to figure out how to reach certain demographic groups. And part of that is because they have no one in that group at all represented at any point in their company. And there was one example that I found fascinating. It was somebody was like a racist soap dispenser. I can't believe it. But what it was there was a soap dispenser and you put your hand under it and it spits out soap. And I'm sure you've seen these before.
Right. Yeah.
There was one that was being developed and this Black woman put her hand underneath it, but because they had never tested it on anything but someone with a white hand, it couldn't perceive that there was a woman's hand there. They couldn't perceive that her hand was there. And she was like, this is why you need diversity in your company.
Yeah. Yeah, those decisions are made with a point of view. Mm-hmm. We were talking a little bit earlier about my dear friend and mentor Nilofer Merchant, and she talks about this a lot with onlyness, this idea that everybody comes to the world with their own point of view, their own experiences, and if you put everybody in the room that has like similar points of view and experiences, you're not going to get innovative at all, right? So like, it's not only that you'll make more money because now you understand the consumer, but innovation is stagnant too. And we had Cindy Gallup. I don't know if you know who that is.
I do know Cindy. Not personally, but I know her from the Twitterverse.
Yeah, she's amazing. And we had her on the podcast and we asked her like, okay, so future of, advertising agencies are completely in chaos right now. Future, like, how do you fix that? She's like, put more women in.
Yeah.
And more women of color, because we've kind of run out of all of the same ideas by the same people over the decades. So if you put fresh new people with like fresh new cultural experiences into the mix, guess what? That's where innovation comes from.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so crazy.
I mean, the solution seems obvious and it seems right there, but I think in order for that to happen, the powers that be need to be willing to relinquish some of that power.
Yeah. Oh, well, and that's, I think, the biggest hurdle to get over.
Yeah.
Because that's, I think, how privilege works to stay in power.
Oh, absolutely.
You don't want to, even though like you have 3/4 of the pie or whatever, you don't see it as like as things are going to get better, so the pie is going to get bigger.
Right.
You always just see it as having less pie.
Right.
At the end of the day, I don't know where that metaphor came from, but it just like
no, but it's the one that commonly comes up, right? That there's this limit of that somehow like everything is limited, that resources are limited, that advancement is limited, that improving the world is something that's limited, whereas it's not giving. Yeah, relinquishing power when you have a shit ton of it will make things better for everyone.
Yeah, it just makes that pie bigger instead of like thinking about yourself, giving it up. I mean, I don't empathize with the fear, but I know like where it comes from psychologically.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that this is part of the reason why it is in part so hard to see your own privilege, because these are, like you said, like all of these organizations and institutions work to preserve themselves. So white supremacy works to preserve itself. And one of the ways it does that is by making you blind to your own privilege.
Yeah, and also like another Cindy Gallupism, just to sort of bring her in.
I'm excited by this because I've never had the privilege of meeting her, but I've interacted with her on Twitter.
She's amazing.
So, yeah.
And what Cindy is really great at is pointing out she's great at the zingers of like how to point out something that's like wrong in a very direct, like fearless way, which is amazing. And one of the things that she talks about is like, you know what? It's not just like giving up. So if we go back to the pie, it's like, let's just push this metaphor to the crazy places and say, why do we even only just have one pie? Like, why are the rules that have been set, the ways in which we measure success, the ways in which we use power these days are set from centuries of white supremacy. And male as well, and heterosexual, right? Ideas of the world.
Heteronormative,
So for women or people of color or the LGBT community to come in and take that up, it's like, it feels like a bad fit.
Sure.
And so why not just have multiple pies, like
change the metric for what success is, and then more people are able to be successful.
We talked about this a little bit too, is the problem with the trolling and this sort of attention that somebody like Donald Trump or anybody else who's a troll, the Alex Joneses of this world, like the problem here is that they do gain attention, so they're setting a new example of what gets attention.
Oh yeah, it's effective, isn't it? It's what works.
And the problem is young people who are watching these platforms, well, even older people, anybody who's watching these platforms is getting the lesson that you will be rewarded for this kind of behavior.
Oh, absolutely.
And you're not rewarded for just being a good person.
I feel like even unscrupulous brands at this point are sort of like already using tactics that are similar to this. That just, it's not really about the value of what they do. It's just, being controversial online and just like, hey, let's be controversial to get attention.
I think it's so important to have the platforms that have the power. And as you said in your talk, and I was like, yes, it's not free speech because it's a private company.
I saw you nod during that part, I felt so. I was like, oh, good. And you also nodded when I was like, is this how Canadian? Because I was trying to delve into Canadian free speech law. I was like, that's how it works, right? And you were nodding, and I was like, okay, good.
Well, it's like I think the best company to handle this in the last couple of months was Pinterest. And it said it's like freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom of reach, right? That was like, oh my God, someone.
But Ben Silverman is like he's an ally. He's a Carlos in Iran. Like he's that guy, right? If you've ever met him, he's oh my God, he's so sweet and wonderful, and his intentions and his actions match, and like he's like one of those like built a company that's successful in spite of the fact that everything was kind of against somebody like him succeeding, the good guy finishing. And I think it's because he focused on women and women like were who helped build Pinterest, and he was so grateful and very.
I'd be curious too to see kind of the makeup of the company, because I suspect it is. There've got to be quite a few female execs there. But it reminds me too. His quote reminds me of. I always get this acronym wrong. Is it XKCD?
Yeah.
The one where they talk about freedom of speech. Have you seen that one? Where basically they dissect it because somebody is screaming like, you can't delete my comment because of freedom of speech. And they kind of just very calmly kind of dissect what that means. And it's freedom of speech doesn't mean that you can say whatever you want without consequences. You can say these things, but people won't necessarily like it And if they don't like it, they will show you the door.
Yeah. Well, and the consequences are what's, I think, the very, very important piece here, because the consequences right now for somebody being a troll, acting racist, misogynist, homophobic, xenophobic online are rewards, are positive rewards.
They have an audience. You can build a business around it.
Yeah, and you know, I personally think the platforms need to change the reward system to actually have negative consequences. They lose their accounts, they lose their followers, they lose that voice.
Yeah.
Even if, at the very least, like I think it was the, who was that terrible guy, Yiannopoulos?
Milo Yiannopoulos. Yeah, he's come for a couple of my friends.
But that just shows you the incentives and the way that we value things and how we reward things, and just in general the way that this structure is set up is broken.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, the news report just came out yesterday that that Twitter does have the ability, Carlos, you saw this as well, does have the ability to basically algorithmically weed out Nazis and could throw them out. But if they did, they would accidentally flag too many Republican accounts.
And I was like, the problem is?
Well, I mean, I think that, you know, my argument was, well, that suggests a problem with American conservatism today, right?
Yeah.
If the AI labels you as a Nazi, maybe you need to change your political framework.
Yep.
And the other thing, too, is that Twitter has effectively gotten rid of ISIS from their platform using machine learning. And in the process, they also have erroneously flagged several Arabic news sites that mention ISIS, but they felt that the benefit of doing so outweighed the risks. But they have offered that. They have basically punished legitimate Arabic news sites, but they won't inconvenience racist GOP politicians in order to get rid of Nazis. And if you think about that, that is absurd, and it's just kind of white privilege in action.
Oh, in a huge, huge way. Yeah. And it just keeps reinforcing the bad behavior, because, like, you know, I know they cry out about nanny state or, you know, like freedom of expression or whatever.
They're private companies. I'm going to scream. Sorry.
Yeah, no.
Like,
Yes. But even if the government stepped in or whatever happened, at the end of the day, like, I am okay with a certain amount of societal or external pressure towards a more positive behavior, because that is how change has happened over history. Like, slavery did not end because people were like, oh, okay, well, we just won't have slaves anymore. That's, you know, I made that decision. No, they needed to be forcefully led into that decision. Kicking, screaming, shooting into that decision.
And I think I think freedom of speech means that you are allowed to spout whatever disgusting, hateful Nazi rhetoric you want, at least in the United States. But I think if we are a good, just society, you shouldn't feel comfortable doing that. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of the area. Like, you should be concerned and feel badly. Like, you should feel badly. I don't know. I feel like that's not an unreasonable thing. Yeah. Nazis are bad, but suddenly people are like, what? Oh, don't be hateful. I'm like, no, Nazism is bad, and you should feel bad if you're a Nazi, and you shouldn't be saying this shit online. Like, I don't know.
Well, and at the very least, you shouldn't be given a like an
platform to monetize.
Right?
Yeah. But there's a YouTuber right now.
Like everybody has freedom of speech. People can go, they can make their own blog.
Oh, yeah.
And they can spout as much hate as they want.
Absolutely.
But don't be giving them a forum to amplify it.
Right. And to put sponsored tweets or make money off of. There's a YouTuber right now. I don't know what her name is. She's a minor. She's under the age of 18, and she has an incredibly popular YouTube account, millions of subscribers, and she's spouting Nazi rhetoric. And so it's like, well, where I think that we're not holding platforms accountable for being responsible at all. I think they've abdicated too much responsibility. And I think that's a problem. We saw this in the Christchurch shooting. 4chan, he listed all of his intentions on a bunch of websites.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Not at all.
It's like one of the things that it's fundamental. And I always bring the anecdote of the creator community because I was telling the Rand in the previous episode that, I spent many years in the YouTuber community and sort of doing that. And the only time, and YouTubers always sort of like pinpoint these things and they're like, hey, this is happening. And they complain to YouTube and they complain to Google, nothing happens. Brands start paying attention.
Yeah.
Start doing stuff, then the platforms start complaining.
Absolutely.
And then this is the part that's really infuriating.
The money
right
is going to be the pressure.
Because we're constantly seeing like every quarter that these platforms are still going up and up. And there's a couple of threats here and there where the P&Gs of this world sort of like, oh, we're going to pull advertising, and then like a month later they're back, right?
Yeah.
And then 6 months later, like another issue happens. It's like, can we not fix this? It's like
so we should be pressuring the brands to pressure the platforms.
We have the full on example right now where we're managing campaigns with like for ads on Facebook, and we've been like, why are we on Facebook?
Yeah, we
do not need to be on Facebook. Yeah. Facebook's been like super like not cooperative in certain things, and it has nothing to do with this. But at the same time, it's like I just do not want to recommend Facebook.
Yeah,
we purposely. Obviously if strategy is right and the audience is there and all that sort of stuff, we'll work with the platform. But like for this one, it's like we were there, but there was like, we're still testing things. And I was like, okay, we've done the tests. It doesn't work. Facebook's being a jerk. Let's stop giving money to this platform.
Yeah.
I really do think that's a good answer, though, is like the money tends to be where people do budge on decisions.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Like the only solution is like shaming the brands.
Yeah.
Right? Shaming the brands. You're supporting this. And it happened with Alex Jones.
Yeah.
Right? And, it should still be happening. Right?
Yeah.
And it's just the problem is that maybe it's to a point now where these influencers are becoming a little bit micro. So the brands are a little bit less, Alex Jones became this sort of like, top king of the hate and the craziness. Yeah. And he was easy to sort of like get to, but now there's hundreds of them. There's that hundreds of people doing this type of bad behavior
because there's so much money in it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so I think you're right. I think that really the money is kind of one of the few ways, because I think we've seen it more than governmental regulation, more than anything else, because somebody was like, well, like, can you put pressure? Can you affect change through legislation, through this and that? I'm like, no, like Facebook's more powerful than the US government. Yeah. Like they are, like Google is too. It's really hitting them where their wallet is. And one of the sites I recommended for looking up, advertisers who are promoting
really great.
Is Sleeping Giants, and they're great at finding kind of the advertiser that is behind, like if they're supporting a hate website or anything like that. And they are pretty active internationally. So they've got Canadian websites, they've got European ones as well. So they're a great site to check out.
Yeah, and I think that's a really, really smart way to combat this, and I'm definitely going to be supporting Sleeping Giants a lot more after watching your presentation and putting that money pressure, because seems to be the only thing that's going to make the needle move. It has been an amazing conversation and
thanks.
great pleasure to have you on the podcast. I'm so glad that, we saw your session.
Thank you so much for coming to the session, and thank you for having me.
Thank you.
So I was mostly quiet on that one because I just wanted to let the awesome women talk. But I also wanted to note that literally the moment Geraldine left our makeshift studio in the hotel, she got amazing news.
Yeah, she won James Beard Foundation Journalist Award for her personal long-form essay, I Made the Pizza Cinnamon Rolls from Mario Batali's Sexual Misconduct Apology Letter, which I have to say, everybody needs to go and look up. We will put the link to that into the show notes because it is a brilliant piece. It's also a hoot to read. And I will have to tell you, spoiler alert, I am not going to make those pizza cinnamon rolls myself. It sounds like they didn't turn out so great, but the article did. So thank you so much, Geraldine. If you enjoyed the conversation that we had with her, or mostly I had with her as much as I did, please do give us a positive rating on iTunes and follow us everywhere we are.
Yes, we're on most of the social platforms. So just look up Anatomy of a Strategy.
Until next week.
Have a good one.